What is up? Good morning and welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot, Club Fantasy's weekly mock draft show. I am your host, back from hiatus. In fact, I think this is the first time I've been live on air for like 2 weeks at this point. And Michael, I know you can relate to that as well. I am Ryan Weisse. With me, as always, Austin Amandolia. Austin, how are you on this wonderful morning of my return to Mock It Like It's Hot?
Honestly, I am so glad you were back. I enjoyed getting to take over the hosting seat last week, but I gotta admit, I was out of my element. I don't know how you manage these shows the way you do, but like you make it look easy, and people, it's not easy. Ryan's doing so much over there, and I'm thankful you're back and glad to be back in my element, just focusing on the draft.
Well, first and foremost, thank you. Kind words to start my morning that I couldn't say I appreciate more. And I think Michael gained a little new appreciation for that last night. Our guest today, Michael Sicoli, the host of Club Fantasy's Dynasty After Party. Mike, you did a mock draft last night as well and had some hiccups hosting and drafting at the same time, a lesson I learned in the first year of this show.
Yeah, it wasn't my first time getting a go at it, but it felt like it, and it probably looked it as well. It's definitely a challenge doing the hosting and trying to draft and making sure you're not auto drafting every fourth round like I got to once I got 10 rounds in. But yeah, props to you, Ryan. Happy to be here though. Talking IDP today.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mike, I know you do a ton with us on the Dynasty level, but I am actually going to flip to another hat that you wear because you are one of the big guys over at IDP guys, and we are talking IDP today. But more importantly, before we get into any of that, I like to let my guests plug things at the beginning because let's be honest, about halfway through the show, people are going to start to tune out. So we're going to get the most bang for our buck. Right now, Michael Sicoli, you do the the newsletter for IDP guys. And I want you to talk about that a little bit because I've checked that out. It's absolutely amazing. I know you're always talking about it on Twitter. So,
well, I appreciate the kind words, especially the big guy. I do think I have chubbier cheeks now. But yeah, it's listen, I run the IDP guys newsletter. I've got IDP news coming out. You know how newsletters work. They come out every week. They come out every day. Mine comes out every week, detailing the defensive news, just like you would want on your offensive side of the ball. So breaking down everything you need to see, a few short form articles for you guys to read, as well as highlighting some articles that you want to be up to date on with your IDP information. So easy, delivered right to your inbox and free. All you can sign up in my link in my Twitter bio at Michael_Sicoli. Yep. Again, link to do that as well as all my.
So I'll make sure it's in the description here as well. So free 99. You can't beat that. So. All right, guys, I'm going to get the draft up. And as you may have picked up already, we're talking IDP today. And it's not going to be a full IDP draft. What this whole point is about, and as we get further into August, what I always like to talk about is this is about changing up your home league. And sometimes that's as easy as having an all flex league like we did a few weeks ago. Sometimes throw some IDP in there. And we're going to talk a lot about this, maybe using IDP to replace team defense. And the way I've set this draft up, it is a 10-team PPR draft. So we are going to draft all of your standard positions, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers. I think I set it up as 2 flex with a tight end. But then I also set up 1 defensive lineman, 1 linebacker, 1 DB, and 1 IDP flex. So you still need to know offense. But a big question that people are going to ask and what we're going to conquer in this draft after I get it started here just now is when do you start drafting IDP with the offensive players? We're not going to answer that just yet. And I do have this set up as a 30-second clock simply because I saw how well it worked on your show last night, Mike. And that's what we're going to do today as well. Fair warning to everyone drafting or watching this draft. ADP for IDP on Sleeper is awful. And if we have an auto pick, it is going to be the worst auto pick you have ever seen in your entire life. It was incredible to watch last night, and I cannot wait to see how it plays out today. But more importantly, let's talk a little bit training camp news. We finally have a full week. We have seen every single team play a game so far. Sicoli, the news on Twitter right now is don't overreact, don't overreact, don't overreact. And while I somewhat agree with that, let's have fun with it. So what piece of news or what player's performance did you see this week that is worth overreacting to? Who are you shunning that news for? You shared a great story that you thought you were over highlight film, and now you're not over highlight film.
Well, you see, we think we grow up until we don't grow up. I think the storyline of fantasy football in general. Every time we think we're into something, we get sucked back in.
Yeah.
And for me, it's exactly that, because I feel like I'm getting sucked back in with this Kansas City rushing attack, and I don't want to be. it's going to be painful because they're going to give it to Mahomes. I know it's going to be a mess. Whoever I pick will be the wrong one. And Jerick McKinnon will probably end up just being the guy. But I am interested in Deneric Prince. I am. I don't think he does anything less than what Isaiah Pacheco can do. Isaiah Pacheco has missed some time this month with injury. He hasn't been out there. Deneric Prince got some hype early in the spring in June. And now he's, showing out a little bit in preseason. So it's something I want to watch for because when you look at Andy Reid, he's willing to put out the best guy out there. It doesn't matter draft capital, doesn't matter anything else. And if Deneric Prince can carve out that type of role, I'm interested.
I think it's a really good point with the Andy Reid thing is Andy Reid doesn't mind jumping to the running back that maybe fantasy managers don't want to be the running back, because we saw it last year with Pacheco, and we saw it doubly last year where he drug an 80-year-old Jerick McKinnon off the streets and made him like the RB5 over the last month of the season, Austin. So you got Deneric Prince, where we're overreacting to the Chiefs starting running back. Do you have anybody for us, Austin?
Yeah, I'd say one that stuck out to me off the bat, like, don't panic on CJ Stroud. He had a rough first outing. He went 2 for 6, 2 for 5, not a lot of completions, threw a pick. That's the nature of being a rookie. That's what the preseason is for. Like, I'm not going to panic about underperforming or overperforming rookie quarterbacks right now. It's all practice. So I'm keeping the faith there with CJ Stroud. I think he's going to turn out just fine. One thing that stuck out with me that was more of a team trend, I watched a very little amount of Cleveland. So to be fair, this is a small sample size, but when I watched them, they looked better in heavy personnel to me. They looked better in heavy personnel and when running the ball in particular, which makes me nervous for the hype that has been made around this passing game throughout the season. Now, again, these are backups. So who's to say what happens when we get the first string guys out there? But I did notice they still had a decent amount of heavy personnel usage and they looked good doing that. So it does make me want to continue fading Cleveland. I've kind of already been fading them this year. And that's just something that I'm keeping an eye on as we go through the preseason.
I want to pile on that a little bit. I actually cover the Browns for Football Guys. And one of the news coming out of camp is that Deshaun Watson is as comfortable, if not more comfortable, with Jordan Akins as he is David Njoku. And while you can look at that as a negative for David Njoku, what I think we're going to see is I think the entire world assumed the Browns were going to run far fewer 2 tight end sets with all these great wide receivers they have. I think we're going to continue to see those 2 tight end sets in Cleveland, which is going to be great for Nick Chubb. It's going to be great for who ends up being the backup running back. And Sicoli, I mentioned on your show yesterday, I think Kareem Hunt's going to end up there. I'm reading these tea leaves. He's being mentioned by Browns articles, and I know he hasn't even met with the Browns yet, but he knows what the Browns have to offer. So I wouldn't be surprised if Hunt ends up back in Cleveland. But I am slightly worried about this extended passing game that we think we're going to see out of Cleveland that maybe we're not going to see out of Cleveland. The other trend with the preseason, Sicoli, is, again, it's people telling people not to overreact. Did you see a performance recently? And I made the joke, and you kind of said maybe you are falling for it. Deuce Vaughn absolutely went off for the Cowboys, but he is still 5'5", 161 pounds or whatever. I can carry him around in my pocket and not even realize I'm doing it. Great running back. Don't know if he's going to make it to the NFL. That would be my cases. Let's not overreact to Deuce Vaughn. Is there somebody out there that you're seeing mad overreactions happening that you would tell people to pump the brakes on, Sicoli?
Yeah, well, for clarification, I am not in on Deuce Vaughn. I just want to say that was a fun joke before the show, and I wish the man the best. But let's be honest here. It's these faces an uphill climb of epic proportions.
Yeah.
But in terms of players I'm looking at, for overreactions, I think Austin mentioned it perfectly. The quarterback overreactions, the rookie overreactions. We just watched the first 8 throws of their NFL career, and people are branding CJ Stroud as, oh my God, it's going to be a rough season, and it could be. Anthony Richardson threw a bad pick, to the shock of none of us, because this is exactly what we would have expected from Anthony Richardson. He is as raw as it comes. So I'm not overreacting to almost anything I see out of rookies. Anything I see out of rookies that is a positive, that's an unexpected bonus that I like to see. But it takes time. And I forget who mentioned it. I've talked to other people about it. These rookies, they didn't spend this past offseason preparing for the NFL season. They spent it preparing for the draft and making their case and getting drafted. it's a whole different game. And that's why we see the sophomore leaps and everything like that. So I'm not overreacting to any slow starts of any kind.
I have to give Stephen Miller Badger a little airtime here. Very small. I think that should just be Deuce Vaughn's nickname. SMOL. He's a little guy. Love him though. But anyway, I completely agree with the rookie quarterback thing. I also cover the Panthers. And what I will point out is Bryce Young's problem is not a Bryce Young problem. It is an offensive line problem that is going to get that man murdered. I am already, and I understand we haven't seen a single real game yet. I'm having David Carr flashbacks because Houston was not equipped to protect a first overall pick, and Carolina is starting to feel that way.
Sorry, not to interject. Can I alleviate those concerns ever so slightly?
Yes, please. Please do.
My only pushback, and I'm in New York here. I watched that Jet game from front to finish, and I was with you the entire way because Will McDonald and Jermaine Johnson 1,000% had their way.
Yes.
My hope is that Will McDonald and Jermaine Johnson should be starters on every single line. They are great pass rushers. And same point, you're at a great point because Akim Kwanu, first round pick a year ago, looked awful, outmatched in every way. And maybe he should be sliding into guard or something like that. But I'm hoping that what we saw the other day was more the Jets and also a bit of a lack of urgency from Bryce Young. We saw that step back, and I love how cool and calm he is under pressure. But the man took 2 step backs and stood still, took his time. I think it's the NFL speed catching him up.
So what I will say is the practice reports have been that he is reacting well when plays are breaking down. We just didn't see it in that game. So what I guess the major difference between he and David Carr is David Carr wasn't going to run away from this pressure. Bryce Young is going to run away from the pressure, being perfectly clear. But no, that does make me feel a little bit better. And again, it's the first preseason game. I'm just nervous for the guy. I'd like to see him succeed. Austin, any other big overreactions you're seeing out there that you would tell people to avoid before we start talking a little IDP?
Yeah, I haven't necessarily seen this overreaction because I haven't been on the Twitter as much, but I can imagine how people might start doing their victory laps right now on one Justin Fields because he threw 2 screen passes that went for 50+ yards. And while I am excited, and it is good that they got him weapons, and they demonstrated those weapons in this preseason game. It is just the preseason, folks, and he is not going to be able to make a living throwing the ball 0 air yards throughout the year and scoring touchdowns. It's not going to work that way.
Negative air yards.
Exactly. Like, he's going to have to throw the ball down the field at some point, and that's the growth we need to see from Justin Fields. We already knew he could throw behind the line of scrimmage. Good job. Glad it worked out for you in preseason. And we need to hit those easy buttons. Like, again, there are a lot of reasons the Chicago Bears should do that from a quarterback development perspective. Just saying, he's going to have to chunk it down the field at some point, and that's going to be where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, I'm going to throw Joel up on the screen just saying Bears Twitter was absurd this weekend, and I think he is absolutely right. I think my 3 favorite graphics, and the graphics people were killing it this weekend. Justin Fields, this might even have been just a tweet I saw, but it was his 3 first passes were -3, -2, -3 air yards, but he looks fantastic off of that. Sicoli, you mentioned, you paid a lot of attention to the Jets. Did you see the 2 graphics from the Jets games? My favorite was Bryce Young, 1 sack, 3 knockdowns, got up 4 times. That was an amazing graphic that they counted it as a statistic.
Yeah. Actually, I didn't see that one. That's great. But that entire production team, with all due respect, and as someone with a sports journalism background that would love to have that exact job, debut Life 2001 Life.
That's one. That was the one. That was the second one I was going to go to.
That's
they compared.
Yeah,
they compared Aaron Rodgers and Bryce Young. Showed every stat. Showed 0 stats for Young, but then for debut they had 2005 for Aaron Rodgers NFL and 2001 for Bryce Young, and put the word life in parentheses.
See, and that bothers me for 2 reasons. One, it's a horrific graphic from top to bottom. It made 0 sense and it served no purpose. 2, I was born in 2001. I don't want to see that broadcasted. I don't want to see Bryce Young, born in the same year as me, is making millions out there. I do have my Scott Fishbowl t-shirt on. I guess that is a bonus, but Come on, don't advertise that for me.
It only gets worse when you realize that they're all younger than you. When Tom Brady retired, I was officially older than every NFL player. So that was a tug on this gray bearded heartstrings here.
I'm not ready.
All
for
right.
that.
Let's get into this draft a little bit. So before I get into the actual draft board, and if you guys have followed this show for any time, you know that the draft is background fodder. And this is just about helping folks understand mock drafting, understand fantasy football, and having fun with this. And one way you can have fun with that is changing your league up a little bit. And so Sicoli, being kind of like the IDP expert over at, with us at Club Fantasy and being one of the guys over at IDP guys, I asked you, is this a good way to intro IDP to your leagues? Because I'm going to be honest with you. I think I screwed up in one of my leagues. We introed it years ago, but we just did an IDP flex. And now I can't get anybody to go to this. And it's just kind of boring in a 14-team league having one IDP flex. So with this league, I wanted them to have to use their brain a little bit. One defensive lineman, one linebacker, one defensive back, and then an IDP flex. 4 positions added to the draft. It's going to be a lot more points, a lot more fun for everybody, but you got to spread things out. Is this a good way to intro a league to IDP?
Yes, and I'll tell you exactly why. Because when you do something less than what we have here, which again is the position groups as well as a flex, when you have that just one flex like you're talking about, you don't have to draft anybody. You could pick them up a day before and get a top 10 play because you're playing the matchup, and it's so easy that way. It's like a quarterback in a 6-team league for offensive.
There's over 400 defensive starters in the NFL, and I'm asking you to start one of them.
Exactly. There are easily 30 linebackers and 15 defensive ends and 10 safeties that will all be extremely valuable in the same tier. So, yeah, I think this is a very good way to intro your league because you get a taste of everything. You get the taste of the defensive line splashes. You get the picks with the defensive backs. You get some QB sacks with the defensive backs as well, and obviously the linebackers being that meat of the position. And I do think it's a very safe way to ease it in. That said, it's still a little bit, it's still pretty deep. So when I look at guys like Timbo's team over there already. And I like it. You got great
you're on the clock
players, but you spend some high draft capital on them. And we're at the end of the day, we're only starting 4. But I don't want to get ahead of myself talk about the draft because I know we will later.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't want you to time out here either. Austin, do you play in many or any IDP leagues? I know you jumped into the IDP guys charity tournament with me and Sicoli last year.
Yeah, I have several IDP leagues going at this point. My home league, we have a similar setup as this one here, where we have 3 IDP slots. The only difference is we don't have IDP flex in that league. And then I joined a startup dynasty league this year where it's 9 offensive players, 9 defensive players. That's a fun one. I did my first IDP best ball draft about a month ago. I think Sicoli might be in that draft with me as well. So we're going to be facing off each other in a little best ball format. And then, doing the IDP guys charity league this year. So I've been increasing my IDP exposure because it's just a fun way to do something different and learn about players that you don't typically think about when you're playing fantasy football. I think I've really enjoyed it for getting to learn more about defensive football in general.
Yeah, our buddy Jorge over at Fantasy and Frames always says, it lets you enjoy both sides of the ball. Why don't you want to watch both sides of football? So before we get into a user question and now start actually talking about the draft, Sicoli, I saw you throw your hands up. You got auto-picked on Alvin Kamara. Who would you have taken?
I'm fine with Kamara for the record.
I'm not going to fix it. So.
Yeah, that's fine. The 3-game suspension makes it a very stomachable pick. I probably would have went with Dallas Goedert because I have 3 running backs already, but happy to have Alvin Kamara. Yeah, it was meant to be. It happened. I to the screen. It just didn't refresh in time.
Yeah, I was going to say, I saw it there. All right, so first one, let's knock out some of this. Get well soon, Jorge. Absolutely. Having some knee problems, had to miss the Expo this week. I also missed the Expo this week. I think all of us here missed the Expo this week. But the Club Fantasy crew was there representing, all drunk off their asses, but all had a great time. Everybody's feeling the hangovers today. Happy birthday to our founder, Josh Hudson. He's not going to hear this for probably a few hours today, but today is his birthday. Our buddy Calvin in the chat. He's a part of the draft. Autism awareness. He loves it. He's in the Scarlet Witch division. And then finally, we have a user question, and it happens to be Dynasty focused. And we have the host of our Dynasty show here with us. So he is the first and second pick in a half PPR Dynasty draft. who would you take? So Awkward Taco, if you can answer quickly, are we talking startup or are we talking rookie draft? So let's start. And I guess we need to ask the very important question, is it super flex? So I'm going to have you clarify, and then I'll get your question back up in the air. Let's jump to the very important question of what is already happening in this draft. You can see it on the board. We saw it in the third round. Micah Parsons, the first IDP off the board in the third round. My question to you, Sicoli, is that too early in this format?
Yes. It's a shame because listen, I never want to. I'm never going to be an IDP shamer here, and I'm certainly not going to be. But I think by the end of this draft, you're going to realize that when you're starting one at each position and a flex. You have so much flexibility for those positions, and then especially when you double up. And I think your own team shows it, where he gets Micah Parsons in the third round. You could have waited 3 more rounds and still got TJ Watt and Myles Garrett after that.
Yeah.
And that type of value you could still see later. Matt Judon going in the 9th, and we still have many more off the board that will go that we're going to like to fill those spots. And especially in this league too, it's only one DL, one linebacker. Micah Parsons fills both. And when you do that, you're kind of, you're probably going to play him a defensive line, but it just, in my eyes, despite it being more flexible, it narrows down just a little bit.
I am going to argue with you because I feel like the Myles Garrett pick destroyed the value that he may have built.
That's what I'm saying.
With Micah Parsons. Yeah, okay, yeah. So we're saying the same thing. I missed it. Okay, so because you would have started him there, but now you have Myles Garrett. So now you have 3 great IDP players, Austin. But I feel like one of the cheat codes folks need to recognize on Sleeper is these linebackers so they can play at defensive line. It seemed like they recognized that, but then they kind of counteract themselves by taking Myles Garrett later.
Yeah, exactly. Like if I'm taking Micah Parsons or TJ Watt early, I'm not touching another D lineman throughout the rest of the draft. I'm going to focus on a high volume linebacker. I'm going to focus on a high volume defensive back and just go from there. But yeah, I agree with you both. I think Micah Parsons went a little early, particularly given how late TJ Watt went. Like they're very similar in the advantage they provide in IDP leagues, depending on the scoring system. But usually I feel like those two are fairly interchangeable when healthy. And so, yeah, I feel like waiting till the 6th round would have been better for getting Micah Parsons.
I'm running through the draft board here, Sicoli, and it looks like, if I'm reading this correctly, and I think I am, Timbo Slice made the first 3 IDP picks of the draft. So maybe he was trying to start a run that didn't run.
It's the right process. I think the wrong execution, because I don't mind jumping on it, but as we've all said, when you get 3 players that could basically, you want them to be defensive linemen because they're not going to be putting up the tackle numbers at linebacker like the other guys. You can only play 2 of them, and one of them's in your flex, so you're really bookending yourself.
I do want to throw Tim's comment up on the screen. Timbo Slice in the chat with us. And I kind of love what he said to end his comment here. He wanted to get elite talent because he is more comfortable knowing where he can find offensive players. And my God, that could be a tagline for this show.
Yeah, very relatable.
Do what you know. And that's really a wonderful point. I'm so happy you're in the chat to explain that to us, because he knows later on in the draft, Austin, he's going to be able to find offensive players because he understands offense. No offense to Tim, I'm just going to say this. Maybe these are the 3 only defensive players he knows. It's probably not the case. But if there are going to be players like that, why not go get the 3 studs who control IDP and then fill up your offensive talent later?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great way to approach it. I know our buddy Joel, like he always talks about the reason that he does the 0 running back strategy is he just knows that he is better at predicting wide receiver performance and hitting on wide receivers. And so he likes to hit those positions early. So yeah, I mean, you got to play to your strengths. And I think there's nothing wrong with just leaning in and doing something different and seeing how it plays out.
Mike, I'm going to let you jump in. It seems like you have one more thing to say.
Yeah, and it's funny because I read that and I realized I'm doing the same thing, but for defensive players right now.
That's a really good point.
I haven't picked a defensive player yet because I feel so confident that I'll be able to get the value later, and hopefully I will. We'll see, but that I haven't taken one yet because I'm counting on my ability to find one later, and I keep on snapping up the offensive value because of the names that I know will be there down the line.
Just so everyone's aware, I didn't see when Team 5 left, but you're about to see a train wreck of auto picks, just so everyone is fully aware. All right, let's get back to this user question. Awkward Taco, first 2 picks in a startup non-super flex. Michael Sicoli, you have hit the lottery. First 2 picks in a dynasty draft, non-super flex. Who are you taking?
Non-super flex. I mean, Justin Jefferson and I have no. Also, what soul did you sell to get these picks?
Right.
But for me, I'm going. I'm simply going Justin Jefferson, Ja'Marr Chase. I'm just gonna very happily just sleep out my life knowing that I have my 2 wide receivers that will be my top 2 wide receivers for the next long time. I'll just say until next year, I guess, when Marvin Harrison comes in.
There you go. Austin, you on the same boat? You taking those top 2 wideouts?
I'm on the same boat with Justin Jefferson, but I'm gonna throw Bijan Robinson in there because I need Bijan in my life, and he's the RB1 in Dynasty for my purposes right now. So I wanna do a little bit of I want to share the love, get some advantages at a couple of positions. I would also consider, like, there's an argument for Travis Kelce. Just saying.
Words out of my mouth.
No, there isn't.
Not with those 2 picks. That's my issue. Michael, I did the draft with you last night. I took the 12 spot on purpose, hoping that Kelce would fall to me. He fell to me. I took him happily. It went exactly how I wanted it to go. But with picks 1 and 2 in a dynasty, I'm going to take the guys who I know are going to be atop their position, maybe with a 3rd being added next year. Give me Jefferson and Chase as well. So, is there an argument in a dynasty, Sicoli, if you've secured something like that, to go get one of the elite quarterbacks? Are you still just leaning wide receiver, even though it's not super flex? In a dynasty, if I know I can plug and play Patrick Mahomes for the next 5 years, is there any argument to be made, or is it still just far too early?
Not for me, and I'll tell you why. Just because, we could wait so long and still find capable quarterbacks in 1 quarterback leagues, and you could always trade. There are going to be teams are going to end up with 3 quarterbacks on their roster. And by week 6, you realize I don't need 3. Like I could deal with 2, and I barely need 2 because my guy's still healthy, still performing for me. And those guys you can go out and trade for really easily and address the position. So, and like in Josh Allen's breakout year, I went out and traded for him 2-3 weeks into the season when Dak Prescott had his ankle snapped in half, and I traded Dak in a second for Josh Allen. Done. Didn't have to spend a top tier pick. I spent a rookie pick, which is always going to be less valuable than your startup pick. So that was my process with it, and something I've kind of stayed true to.
Gotta love this. Helpful for knowing where to value IDP players in drafts, because he has his draft tomorrow. That is exactly what we wanted you to use this show for, Tim. Thank you so much. And Awkward Taco, you say you don't have a pick till the 4th. If all you gave up was your 2nd and 3rd to move up to the 102 or 101, congratulations. That's exactly how you started Dynasty Draft. I'm happy for you there. Okay, so now let's get back to the offensive side of this a little bit. I am intrigued that we are finally, for the first time maybe, starting to see running backs fall in the sleeper ADP, because we've been talking about this for a while, Austin, that sleepers ADP seem to have still been kind of buffing running backs up a little bit. But in the first 2 rounds, we only see, 7 go, but 4 of those 7 didn't go until the 2nd round. Michael, when you look at this, is this what you're starting to think you're going to see out of first rounds moving forward? Lots of wide receiver heaviness and running backs just completely falling compared to what we've seen in past years.
I think a lot of it depends on your league. I think if you have a more casual league, you're still going to see the running backs go ahead. And I think that's fair process to some extent. But, wide receivers have caught up in the last few years, and people are subscribing to that as people become more knowledgeable about the format. And we saw that with how quarterbacks have been priced over the years. And that also swung in the other way of people wanting to spend a little bit more for the elites after not enjoying the streaming game. So I think it really depends on your league. If you have people that are really in tune, I think you're still going to see wide receivers go ahead. But if you have, more of that home league, you get that more diverse bit where running backs are still going to go a bit ahead. Austin Eckler to me is still going to be a very valuable player. And as someone who normally takes receiver heavy, I found myself going running back heavy just the way the board fell.
I was going to say you were one of the 2 who double tapped running back to start everything out, and that's just kind of how the board falls. Austin, does it just break your heart? Because I don't want to say you're down on Christian McCaffrey, but you're certainly not as high on him as others are. Does it break your heart to see this man go ahead of Jeff, Chase, and Kelsey in this draft?
Yeah, I don't have Christian McCaffrey ranked that highly just because he's going to have more competition for touches, at least for rushes from Elijah Mitchell when Mitchell is on the field. Said it over and over again. If you look at the splits with and without Elijah Mitchell, McCaffrey's getting about a touchdown less per game in terms of like score and per game scoring. So like about at least a 6-point difference per game whenever Elijah Mitchell is on the field. So I feel nervous about that. And I don't know, this offense, it's so hard to figure out from week to week. There are too many weapons, and I still am uncomfortable with the quarterback situation there. So yeah, it makes me nervous, but hey, get your guy.
Michael, one of the things I've had to remind myself as I'm starting to get more and more into redraft and getting closer to my redraft drafts, and even in a few of my redraft draft, I had to physically think I need to get out of a dynasty mindset. How do you feel about Bijan Robinson as the second running back off the board after what we saw from Austin Eckler last year? Would Bijan have been your pick if they were both there?
Because it is a real thing, right? When you're going out of dynasty into redraft, you still want the young guys because you're still thinking like that. And that's how I get Bobby Wagner as late as I got him, but I'm happy about that. So that's okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very tough thing to decide between Bijan and Eckler back to back. They went 2 picks apart. I think that's totally fair. I probably would have went Eckler just because I do believe in the Chargers offense more than I believe in the Falcons offense. And while I have no idea what's going to happen to Eckler contract-wise next year, doesn't matter to me for redraft.
Austin, how do we feel about Josh Jacobs right now? So Josh Jacobs, and I believe I'm going to get this wrong. I think it was in standard scoring, Josh Jacobs was the RB1 last year. So in standard scoring, RB1, 0.5, I think he was RB2. Falling all the way to the 3rd round, obviously in this contract dispute. It seems like, putting it bluntly, running backs are about to fold on these contract disputes. We have Jonathan Taylor supposedly reporting to camp this week. Starting to see like J.K. Dobbins is starting to feel a little bit better with his injury issues that were actually contract issues. Josh Jacobs still isn't seeming to budge. Josh Jacobs in the 3rd. Good pick. Too risky for you, Austin?
I think it's a good pick. The value's there. Just the idea of Josh Jacobs like sitting out an entire year just seems unlikely to me. And so I think I'm fine taking him right now in drafts. And, he was elite last year. So why not take him, take the risk on him? Yeah, I'm fine with the pick. They're probably going to get a deal done. They're going to have to, right? Like either that or another team is going to sign him. He was too good for a team not to want him.
All right, Michael, I'm going to put you on the spot with your co-host here. We've been talking about the elite quarterbacks and where they should go in drafts basically since this show started into its redraft focus. And Austin and I have basically agreed 2nd, 3rd round for these elite guys. And we're calling the top 3 the elite guys. Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, the elite guys. That feels safe. Joel is picking from the turn. He did not want to wait on his quarterback. He did not get his Patrick Mahomes like he certainly would have wanted with his 2nd round pick. He takes Justin Herbert to back end the 3rd. Is this where Herbert belongs in this new Kellen Moore offense, Michael?
Yeah, man. It's close to drafting him where we want him to finish. Like I think it'll be totally fine, and maybe we feel a little bit better about if he had it at the 410 or 401 instead of the 310. But it's something that I don't mind, but you really need him to take that step forward. He can't do what he did in the past. And he was still good, but he can't do what he did in the past and justify 310. Now, my only issue with taking a quarterback early, and if I am going to take someone like Mahomes, who's otherworldly, or someone with the rushing upside, because I just waited. What did I just wait? How many rounds did we just go deep? I just waited 15 rounds and took Anthony Richardson. Dak Prescott's still here. Tua's still here. There's so many quarterbacks that I'd be more than happy to have. And I get maybe they don't have that QB1 overall ceiling, even Anthony Richardson with the rushing upside. But if I can get stable QB play and still get a guy like Devonta Smith, like D. Higgins, like Deebo Samuel, Jahmyr Gibbs, instead of that quarterback, that's still the way I tend to be leaning.
Gotcha. And folks, I will scroll down eventually for the back end of the draft. We're going to talk about these guys' drafts and any picks that stand out to them. But the first round, these first 10 picks or whatever are what really matters. I'm going to get to a couple of comments here, but I'm going to go to Joel first. He knew quarterback wasn't coming back to him. He wanted to get his guy, and he hashtag drafting from the turn. And I drafted from the turn of your draft last night, Michael. And I thought Joel made a great comment about there is an extra level of comfortability you need to have to choose to draft from the turn. And something he said that really stuck with me was you need to be willing to dictate the draft. You can't let things fall to you. You need to make decisions on the spot. So when you draft from the 1 or the 12, Michael, it's a little bit different than drafting from the 5 or the 6.
For sure, because you're trying to predict who's going to be coming around. And at the end of the day, it's what we've been talking about in this entire show and this 35 minutes so far, is you're going to take your guys. You're going to have fun with it because you don't know who's going to make it back. And trying to do that guessing game is really a fool's errand. So you do have to be aggressive in that way. And I love that verbiage that Joel used, because you set the law here. You know, if you want that quarterback to go, you know Herbert's not coming back. You know Brees isn't coming back, so you take him. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, and Stephen Miller noticed something interesting going back to the rookie running backs. The 1.6 to 4.5 gap between Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson, Austin. How do we feel about that? Now, they ended up on the same team. Deshwain obviously out here trying to land these rookie running backs. But how do we feel about a full 3-round gap between the best rookie running back and the second best rookie running back in a PPR league?
I feel good about it. I just don't think the volume's going to be there for Jahmyr Gibbs to really legitimize going much higher than that. Like even going a full 3 rounds later, he's still going as a high-end RB2, which I think is appropriate for him. There's not a lot of running backs ahead of him that I think he's going to outperform. I think, maybe I would prefer him over Ramondre Stevenson and maybe over Tony Pollard, just because I'm not a huge Tony Pollard fan, but yeah. I don't feel great about that. I feel like you're still getting enough competition from David Montgomery in that offense that it's pushing his ADP down, rightfully so.
I think that's an interesting point, Michael, is maybe not so much looking at the round value as the positional value. So Gibbs, while he went far after Bijan Robinson, was still only the 11th running back taken. So focusing more on where he falls within running backs, how do you feel about Gibbs as the RB11, Michael, in a redraft league?
If anything, it's closer to being too high than too late, in my opinion. And,
okay.
I mean, he's going right behind Brees Hall. That feels right. You have the injury risk of Brees Hall, but we know what he's done. We have the upside of the receiving game of Jahmyr Gibbs, but we know that Dave Montgomery is going to have a pretty solid role in that offense. So, yeah, he's going to be a good player. He's going to have to be efficient with his touches, but I'm not going to overpay for it. And I think this is the guy that the dynasty aspect is overflowing into the redraft area.
Yeah, and I think the fact that he's going ahead of players like Najee Harris, Joe Mixon, Kenneth Walker, even Aaron Jones, like Jordan Love's first play under center in the preseason was a dump off pass to Aaron Jones. Like, he's going to be getting volume. He's going to be a prominent target, not overhyped in the preseason, but like that spoke to me like, okay, this is a guy that they want the offense to flow through at times. So having Gibbs going ahead of those guys who are the clear number 1 running back in their offense makes me nervous. Like Jahmyr Gibbs, he's probably not getting the ball when they're within the 5-yard line. He's just not. And if he does, it's going to be a rare situation where they have him lined up in the slot. They're putting him in motion, trying to distract defenses. But I don't think he's going to be your goal line back, which is going to impact his upside if he's not scoring those touchdowns.
All right, before we start looking at the draft, which is ending, we're going to get one last user question. Non-PPR. And Calvin, you're not going to get non-PPR hate on my shows. That's a Josh and Joe problem. I enjoy non-PPR. I enjoy all different types of fantasy. He's choosing between Jeff or Christian McCaffrey. He knows better than to keep a quarterback, and it doesn't cost anything for keepers. So he's just picking which one he wants to keep. This is Jeff pretty easily, right?
The non-PPR is the wrench in the works here. And I get that negates CMC a little bit as well, because obviously it's Christian McCaffrey's production. I'll still go with Jefferson. I don't want to overthink it. Truthfully, I haven't played in not even a half PPR league. I don't know the last time I played it. So I feel like I might be the wrong guy to ask, but I'll go Jefferson.
So here's how I would look at it before I let Austin answer is I think 1,800 yards is each of their ceilings. Now, obviously, you could argue touchdowns, and Austin, you're going to argue Elijah Mitchell could steal some of those touchdowns pretty easily. So, but the thing that makes the decision for me here is I'm assuming you can keep these guys in perpetuity, and Justin Jefferson is going to have the longer shelf life for you than Christian McCaffrey is going to, plain and simple.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to think about it. And I'm with you. And I do think Justin Jefferson probably has at least equivalent touchdown upside to Christian McCaffrey, if not more. Like, he's just such a dominant player. And he could have a 2,000-yard season. You know, like that ceiling is there. Christian McCaffrey, I think it's possible, but it's less likely in his current offensive system where he's got Elijah Mitchell. He's got Deebo Samuel, who will run the ball at times as well. So I'm with you there, taking Justin Jefferson.
Well, Joel just stole some of my thunder. I'm just verifying that everything is correct here. So, guys, I had a wonderful keep, trade, cut question for you. And it has just come to light that Oluokun was not even drafted in this draft. Joel said he.
No, I got him.
You got him. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I could not find him.
I saw him go. No worries.
Okay, I actually see him now. He's right above my head. Okay, Joel had me worried that he wasn't taken, and I was very nervous. So
that would have,
as you guys know, I like to.
Don't you worry, buddy.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Well, as Austin certainly knows, I love to torture Austin and my guest, and so this week's keep, trade, cut question is going to be IDP focused before we get into these teams. And so, Michael, you have to choose between your boy TJ Watt, Micah Parsons, and the tackle leader Oluokun. Keep one, trade one, and you have to say that you would cut one of these players in IDP. How would you do it?
Oh, that's harsh. Are we talking redraft here?
Yes.
Okay. Oh man, because I'll break it down like this. Foy will have the most points, most likely. He's led the league in tackles the last 2 years. He's looking to do it for the third time, which would be the second player ever to do that. Listen, I'm going to trust my guy Dynasty Santa on Twitter, who has made the case against Micah Parsons to be going as high as he is. Not that it's going to be bad. I'm going to go. I'll keep Watt because I believe in building around the defensive lineman in most formats, and I'll trade Foy because we're looking at age. If we're talking not redraft, but whatever. I'll trade Foy because he is typically the first linebacker, second linebacker off the board normally. In terms of inside linebackers, and I'll trade Micah Parsons, or I'll cut Micah Parsons, which feels wrong, but there's no wrong choices among the three.
Yeah, there were hypes this week that Micah Parsons might be the best defensive player in the NFL, and we just
certainly could be.
Austin.
Yeah.
So, oh boy, this gets a little bit into your style of play. I will say. So my style of play is I do like a safe floor. And so because of that, I am also going to keep Oluokun. And then I'm going to trade Micah Parsons because I think the name recognition is just going to get me the value there. Like, people are like, oh, this is the new defensive player of the year. And they're a little bit like, TJ Watt, he's old and injured, right? Which is wrong. But that I could see that being perception that devalues his trade value. And then I'm going to cut TJ Watt, which that's bonkers. I would never actually advise that. But I agree with Michael here. I think there is a little bit of danger to Micah Parsons. As someone that has Micah Parsons in a dynasty league, he's a pretty volatile player. He is not consistently getting you those points because they've started to use him more as a dedicated edge rusher. And defenses are aware that Micah Parsons is Micah Parsons. And so he gets double teamed, triple teamed all the time. And the thing about it is Dallas doesn't actually need to move Parsons around that much for him to have an impact because they have other good pass rushers there. And so Micah Parsons would just stay on the same edge. He often lines up, I'd say most commonly lines up on the right side, even though he does move around a little bit. And they'll just use their other players. They'll basically use Parsons as a decoy to put pressure and use those other players as their primary blitzers. So I do think there's some risk with Parsons going too high this year.
I love that. I told Austin before you even joined the pregame, Michael, that I figured you would both cut Foy. I grossly underestimated you, scholars and gentlemen. I absolutely love it. Guys, I'm going to jump right into your teams, and then we're going to talk about if any other picks stood out to us. So, Michael, I'm going to get started with you. So I love that you said normally you are not going robust running back anymore, and you didn't quite go full robust running back, but you started your draft with 2 running backs.
Yeah, again, it's not how I normally do it, but Austin Eckler being there and also with really, in my it was him or CD Lamb, and that was really a tough decision for me and going against my own philosophy. It's a mock, and the big thing I want to get across in these mock like it's when you try different strategies. I don't normally go robust running back, but I want to see how my team turns out, and honestly, I'm fairly happy with it. So yeah, getting Eckler and getting Jonathan Taylor to me is two guys that will be top 5 running backs, and I still get pretty stable wide receiver play between Devonta Smith and the rest of them, as well as some safe play with a Christian Kirk filling in, some upside of Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara's suspension. I waited on quarterback, which is what I was able to do, and I waited on tight end, which I didn't love to do, but again, I got Dallas Goedert was taken from me because I was too slow. But I think I made it work, and I'm very happy with the IDPs that I was able to line out there too.
What I want to ask you though is, seeing that you were able to get Freiermuth 7 rounds later than you were going to take Goddard, is there still regret on Goddard? Or again, this is about experimenting, seeing that there could be a guy like Freiermuth who I like a little bit further down the draft, and I think they could end up with the same amount of targets this year.
Yeah, I think I lucked out a little bit because I do think that if Freiermuth was gone, I like guys like Njoku as well, despite the two, what we were talking about at the top of the show about maybe being a little bit more run heavy. I think it lucked out a little bit of how it fell for me, about how late I was able to get in. Maybe that's the IDPs factoring in as well, some auto drafts helping me out. But I probably would have liked to attach myself to the better offense, but Pickett looked good in week 1 preseason. So who knows? The discount I was able to get on him at this draft cost, it does certainly make me feel better about missing out on Goddard.
Before I have you talk about your IDPs, because I want you to focus on your IDPs, you get, I think they were both drafted in 2020, 2020's second 2 running backs taken, Jonathan Taylor and DeAndre Swift, at very different parts of the draft. Yeah. I'm going to have you comment on both of them. Are you very comfortable in a non-mock taking Jonathan Taylor in the 2nd round with what's going on right now?
With the news that came out this week, or not this week, but yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, literally.
That Jonathan Taylor, about 20 minutes before our Dynasty After Party show came out, that Jonathan Taylor is planning to report to camp later this week. And that's it. Because that both, as Joel said yesterday on our show, that tells us this was never a back issue. This wasn't an ankle issue. This is a contract issue. And one way or another, they've either moved past it and agreed to play it out or something. If he's there, they're going to play. And at that point, I'm treating it like Jonathan Taylor, somebody that I think will be the running back 1 this year if he stays healthy and we have no contract disputes or squabbles. So very happy to get that. And as for Swift, it's
very late.
It's weird because I said this on yesterday's as well, because I drafted Swift yesterday. I don't know the last time I have. I have been out on Swift at the cost for so freaking long. And now I've taken him in back-to-back drafts, which is absolute insanity to me. But yeah, getting him as my RB5?
Yeah.
Why not?
In the 10th round.
Yeah, I'm very happy taking that chance. It's insanity to me.
All right, and then so let's focus on your IDPs. Brian Burns as your defensive lineman, Bobby Wagner as your linebacker, Kyle Hamilton as your DB, and Shaq Leonard as your flex. I want to speak specifically starting with Brian Burns because he is technically an outside linebacker and Carolina's new 3-4 defense, but Sleeper has as a defensive lineman, so that's a win for you, buddy.
Yeah, well, God bless Sleeper for having that, because that man is an outside linebacker as much as I don't even know. Not even TJ Watt, because Brian Burns is an outside linebacker by scheme, not by player. So yeah, I'm always happy to get my star defensive lineman. Normally it's my first deep IDP taken. I just really want to get Wagner a couple rounds earlier. And this team desperately needs Brian Burns so unbelievably badly.
Yes.
There is no pass rusher on this team that is remotely good enough to get it done. And Brian Burns is excellent. He's a great player. He's proven it. He's as safe as he comes at on the defensive line. So I'm always happy to have some Brian Burns in my life.
Gotcha. And then you went with the elder statesman, Bobby Wagner. You said a favorite of yours, right?
Yeah. Listen, the age, who cares about the age? Because he's still producing. He's still Bobby Wagner. And, last year he was an LB1, top 5 type of player with the Rams. Now he comes back to Seattle. We literally know exactly what he will do in this system. Jordan Brooks is still dealing with an ACL injury. And even when he comes back, Bobby Wagner has had his best years next to Jordan Brooks. So who cares? When I'm looking at IDPs, I got an upside of safety, and Bob Wagner is going to be 100% of snaps. There's no worries about it. So when I'm getting him as late as I am, Nick Bolton as well, going 1 pick before me, is a great value.
I was gonna say he was gonna come up a little bit later.
Certainly some interesting picks that fell this way, but that's the tier I do genuinely see Bobby Wagner in. I think he is in that Nick Bolton tier for redraft purposes.
And it seems like you bought that injury dip on Shaq Leonard as well.
Yeah, that dip. The guy that was the IDP 101 overall just a few years ago was Shaq Leonard. And yeah, it's been ugly, but guess who made his return to the field this past weekend? Shaq Leonard. So yeah, it's scary, but right now he's healthy. He's going at my second to last pick, and he has a IDP overall 101 type of, that's not a ceiling anymore, but he's done it. And it's as safe as it comes for an IDP flex. And in this type of format, it's a cut and release if it doesn't work out.
Perfect. Austin, we're going to jump over to your team. Starting with the top, you went wide receiver with that third overall pick. Did you know you were going to go wide receiver, or were you expecting Christian McCaffrey to fall to you there? More importantly, let me just ask the on the nose question. If the first two picks were Jefferson and Chase, would you have went McCaffrey?
No, I probably would have went Travis Kelce there or Tyreek Hill. I was, I took this spot because of Google. It generated a random number for me. It was great. And then I kind of I was going to feel it out and see what happened those first two picks. And thankfully Chase fell to me. I don't typically take Ja'Marr Chase. I don't know why. There's just something about, he feels volatile, even though he can pop off for 40 points and his floor is like 10 points. Like, it's not that bad.
It's not true volatility.
it's not Mike Williams, but it's like, there's something in my gut that's like, I know this is not my style, but I decided let's just try it out. And then taking Nick Chubb and Tony Pollard, those are two running backs I typically avoid, just because I don't feel excited about them whenever I'm like pulling for them, which is maybe bonkers on my part, but I decided let's just see how I feel about it. And I'm like, okay, I actually kind of dig my running back room here. Like, I don't have to worry about running backs the rest of the time. And then I just was like, I'm going to fill up my receivers and sprinkle in some IDP players. I lost track of Kyle Pitts at one point. I was going after him, but he went earlier than I thought he was going to go. And so then I just waited and finally ended up with Chico Okonkwo, which I'm surprised that I got him. I'm not huge on Okonkwo this year, but when it's the 14th round and I'm just picking a tight end to score me a touchdown every week, why not? Let's go with Chig. As far as the IDP players go, the big oops on my part is that every single one of my IDP players have the same bye week, which I don't care about that much.
In this type of league, it's so easily replaceable. It makes so much sense.
Right. Fine. I'll figure it out down the road. I also drafted 3 San Francisco 49ers.
Yes, you did. You're all in.
Which I just like, I love this team, right? So going Nick Bosa, I mean, the Bosa pick is just like, this dude's a freak. He's going to get at least 15 sacks. Like, come on, can I just pick the over on that right now? I'm a big fan of Bosa's game, and I think they just that defense really feeds through him. I did get Oluokun again, tackle leader, going 3 years in a row, wanted that floor. Love me some Fred Warner. This guy, he is an uber athlete. He is one of these linebackers. I feel like he can be a threat in the pass rush game, and he also can drop back in coverage. Like, there's some iconic Fred Warner plays, so I love getting him there. And then Talanoa Hufanga, I mean, come on. Just another great, gonna rack up a bunch of tackles, gonna force some turnovers. If we're scoring for passes deflected, I think he's gonna get a couple here and there, so it's gonna be great. I thought about going Kyle Hamilton with that pick, but Hufanga was still there, and I was like, how can I not? He's like top 10 IDP player last year.
And they have an interesting schedule, the 49ers. You mentioned you grabbed 3 of them. They start at Pittsburgh. Kenny Pickett turned the ball over a little bit last year. Matt Stafford turned the ball over a little bit last year. Daniel Jones cut out the turnovers, so I don't know about the Giants in week 3. And then Arizona, we don't even know who their quarterback's going to be in week 4. So mentioning you starting with 3 49ers, that's not the worst start in the world with their opening schedule. Sicoli, as the IDP expert, Austin was the second person in this draft to take an IDP. He took the 4th overall IDP, but he was the second person to take an IDP. How do you feel about the IDP players he walked away with?
See, I got no problem with Nick Bosa. I have no worries about the contract holdouts we were talking about before the show. And obviously no issue with the 4 either. I am going to take issue with your other ones, though, Austin. I'll step in. Listen, Fred Warner, is an unbelievable player and arguably like one of the best if not the best linebacker in the NFL. But he is so good in coverage that it does hurt his tackle numbers a little bit that we don't see unless he's getting a design blitz, which is really hit, here and there, not too often used for him. He's dropping 10 yards downfield. And when you look at, a traditional inside linebacker, the Zaire Franklins and a Bobby Wagner, somebody that is just a great run defender. That's why they get great tackles is because they're playing so close to the line because that is their game. And Fred Warner's too good for his own good. And as for Hufanga, great player, zero issues with having him there. I personally prefer Kyle Hamilton because I think he'll play close to the line. And again, with Hufanga, same thing with Fred Warner, too good for his own good. That he plays really deep because he is a sniper with the interceptions. But last year on the back half of the season, when he wasn't getting those turnovers, wasn't getting the big splash plays he was getting the first half of the year, the floor was really low for Hufanga at the end of last season. So it should be better this year. It's another year in, and this time as a firm starter as opposed to the third safety. It should certainly be better, and he'll have a great year. But I just would have preferred to get a more traditional box safety type of player, like a Kyle Hamilton.
I like it. All right. So one thing I'm going to draw everyone's attention to before I get into my oops of the draft, and this is not my oops of the draft, is just how hilarious the auto picks are. It's not letting me switch. It's like my screen is frozen. What is going on?
You might not be able to highlight a team 5, maybe not.
Oh, okay. So let's just put something in here. Nickname him. Okay. Well, you can't really see it, so I'll unclick it. But we have Dominic Rogers-Cromartie, Prince Amukamara. Just wonderful names coming back from the past to remind us that they still existed. I don't even know who this is. A white guy named C. Jones, who is out here with no team right now on somebody's team because Sleeper has no idea what they're doing in the auto draft. I am going to pick on a friend, Joel Worth, for the oops of the draft. And it's something we've already talked about. I know he wanted Justin Herbert, but there was a great comment earlier when we were talking about your Dallas Goedert pick that Dallas Goedert and Pat Freiermuth equal one another. And at least they were relatively late in the draft. I personally feel that Trevor Lawrence and Justin Herbert equal one another. And if you look that Joel spent the 310 on Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence went at the 810, 5 full rounds later, this is why if I'm not getting one of the top 3, I'm not paying up for quarterback. If I can wait and get Trevor Lawrence in the 8th round, I'm doing that all day long. Joel does not agree with me. How do you boys feel about Trevor Lawrence versus Justin Herbert this year, Michael?
Yeah, I touched on it before, and I'm 100% with you when I look at the Lawrence value as well. You could just wait on quarterback. I find myself doing that. I know you guys subscribe to the big 3 idea, and I have no issues with that because we know they're going to finish very highly. But I look at every player later, and I'm just very happy to play the waiting game, and especially if we're in a 10-man league because we can stream even easier that way. So yeah, Trevor Lawrence at the 810 versus Justin Herbert at the 310. I know how I feel on that, and I'll take Trevor Lawrence.
I was also going to pick on him about taking a second defensive lineman with Chase Young way down here at the end when he already had a defensive lineman.
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that.
Are you?
Chase Young's the type of guy that if he's right, if he's healthy, if he's what we want him to be in that contract year, oh my, he could be great. And if not, you just cut and release. It's the same idea I'm going with Shaq Leonard. And yeah, maybe you want a traditional tackle linebacker to be that flex spot, but if not, I don't mind shooting for the stars.
Austin, did this draft confirm late quarterback for you, or are you still leaning on those top 3 guys?
It just really depends. I have a soft spot for Lamar Jackson. I just want to pull for him this year to
you really. I was gonna say money. You took him late 4th. So
yeah, exactly. So, but in general, I will often follow what Michael did and just wait for that quarterback because, in a 10-person league, it's really easy to get a good quarterback while punting. I a little bit disagree with you that Justin Herbert is equal to Trevor Lawrence. I'm a little bit fine with Justin Herbert. I take more
Herbert.
issue.
Also love Lawrence. Let's be clear. I am way over projecting the Chargers and Jacksonville this year.
Which is very classic for you. I take more issue with putting Herbert above Jackson and Fields than I do necessarily with Herbert being taken that high, though.
Perfect segue to our final question of the show. Girth Brooks, Dynasty startup, Justin Fields or Lamar Jackson. Austin, you just said their names. I'm going to let you start. I'm going to let Michael finish.
Oh boy, this is your gotta choose between my children here. I'm going Lamar Jackson because the thing about Jackson is he's proven I don't the media coverage, y'all suck. Okay. Lamar Jackson has proven he can do it from the pocket. People are like, oh, he's not a pocket. That's BS. He can do it from the pocket. Justin Fields hasn't proven that yet. Once Justin Fields proves that, I'll consider changing. But for Lamar Jackson, he's not that much older than Fields for me to feel like the age value is that big of a factor. And I know he can do it both ways.
Michael?
Yeah, I'll take Lamar here. I mentioned on the after party a few weeks ago, there's still a world, although I certainly don't expect it, that Fields is not the starter for the Bears next year. If he totally face plants and doesn't take that step, that world exists. It does not exist with Lamar Jackson. Zay Flowers is going to be a difference maker with him.
Yeah, that's what we were saying about Jalen Hurts last year.
Hey, I'm in on her. I'm in on Fields. I want to just say that. I'm just saying that world exists that doesn't exist between Lamar.
Oh, I'm a Zay Flowers hater because he's 5'9". I don't mess with wide receivers 5'10".
You know who else was? Hollywood.
Who?
Hollywood was also 5'9" with Lamar Jackson.
Okay. Is he listed as 5'9"? I felt like I've had this argument. Now I have to go
5'8", but then it's worse. It's not taller. It's certainly not.
Well, yeah. Okay. Well, that was fun. All right, Michael, tell everybody where they can find your work, not just what you're doing great here at Club Fantasy, but also with IDP, guys. Thank you so much for drafting with us today.
I'm happy to be here, and I appreciate the invite. Everything you guys can find me at is on my Twitter at Michael__Sicoli. You got my links to my work with IDP guys. You got my link to my newsletter, which is my baby, as well as some sports gambling content. I am happy to share. I went 5-0 on my articles this week on picking spreads. So listen, taking that into week 2. So yeah, check that out at WSN as well. But again, all links in my Twitter bio.
Appreciate it, buddy. Austin, what you got coming up?
Yeah, I mean, follow me on Twitter at Austin_FFL. We have the next episode of our basketball podcast dropping tonight. We talk all about tournaments, take some players, done some team takes. We talk some strategy. We review some teams, which was really fun to make fun of ourselves and make fun of other people and how they did well. And also just talk about strategy overall. And then coming up, we'll be doing some ranking shows. I'll be trolling you all on your rankings, and I'm very excited to do that. Other than that, prepping for the regular season, getting ready to roll out all of the DFS content that I'll be doing during the regular season.
Yeah, I'll take a little ownership here. We dropped the ball a little bit on Club Fantasy rankings. You can find mine, Josh and Austin's redraft rankings on our website right now. It'll be many more rankers next year. This year, things just kind of got away from us, plain and simple. Normally, I would go into a huge rant right here about why you need to be following Club Fantasy, and you should go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And I would talk to you about all our shows. They're all great, but there's only one show you need to be worried about. Our Wednesday show is taken over by Kelly Singh and Faith Enos for Women of Fantasy Football. They are doing great guests every single week. They are doing wonderful raffles every single week. This week, we have Lindsey Young and Hope Myers as the guests. Lindsey, big Minnesota Vikings fan, which I think inspired the raffles because we are raffling off an autographed Adrian Peterson jersey and an autographed Justin Jefferson jersey. Raffle tickets are only $5. You can enter as many times as you want, and all proceeds go to Laura Oakman's GALvanize, a program that is set to help women in sports. It's something you want to be a part of. It's a wonderful charity to donate to, and you can actually win some Minnesota Vikings jerseys. So make sure you go to clubfantasyffl.com, click on the Women of Fantasy Football tab, or find them on Twitter. You're going to see links to these raffles. You want to be a part of that. Support women in sports, support women of fantasy football. That's how I'm going to end the show today. Remember, defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy, except in IDP where they both win. But practice makes perfect, and we will see you at the next mock draft. Have a wonderful day.